Carl Sagan once suggested that the universe can be understood without invoking the idea of God, that nature itself is sufficient to explain its wonders if only we look deep enough with the tools of science. His vision was one of awe, but also one of skepticism, where the demand for evidence was placed above the mysteries of faith. Yet if we reflect more deeply, we may see that while his questions were indeed necessary, the answers he offered were incomplete. For the universe is not merely a physical phenomenon to be measured and observed, it is also a profound mystery whose perfection suggests something greater than blind chance. The universe itself is the greatest wonder. Human beings often speak of wonders of the world, the pyramids of Egypt, ancient temples, vast monuments, and technological marvels. Yet these are all ultimately human creations, achievements of civilizations, or mysteries born of our lack of knowledge about past methods. The universe, however, is not man-made. It is not an artifact that can be explained as the result of mere engineering or accident. It is a grand, ordered network of laws, forces, and harmonies that extend far beyond human imagination. To look at the precise orbits of planets, the delicate balance that holds galaxies together, and the cycles of life and death that repeat across billions of years, is to recognize a design that transcends randomness. Nothing in this arrangement suggests chaos pretending to be order. Instead, it reflects an intelligence that binds it all. If everything were revealed to humanity, if every secret of the cosmos and the divine were simply handed to us, then the very essence of human existence, the struggle, the search, the longing for answers, would lose its meaning. A life without questions would be an empty prison. Curiosity is not a flaw. It is the driving force of our humanity. But the scope of our questions must remain within the limits of our perception and reason. Science can guide us to truths about the physical world, to explanations about forces, matter, and energy. But there is a boundary beyond which science cannot cross. Beyond that horizon lies the realm of the unseen, the spiritual, the infinite. To demand that God himself appear before us as an observable object is to misunderstand the very nature of divinity. Carl Sagan's admirers often celebrate his courage to ask questions about the universe and existence, and indeed, such questions must be asked. But the flaw lies in extending those questions into domains where human reason cannot reach. The question, does God exist, cannot be resolved by a telescope, a particle accelerator, or a mathematical formula. The outer eye, sharpened though it may be by instruments, will fail to see what can only be glimpsed by the inner eye. If one is willing to look with that inner vision, with the faculty of insight, with the reflective conscience, then answers are not absent. They are present in the very rhythm of creation. The perfection of the cosmos, the astonishing order hidden in its depths, reveals that behind all this must be a power beyond comprehension, one that is not bound by the limitations of time, matter, or dimension. When human beings confine themselves only to skepticism, their questions loop endlessly, never yielding fruit. A person who demands that God show himself visibly is like a student who insists that the meaning of a poem be drawn not from reflection, but from the ink on the page. The literal form cannot reveal the truth. Only contemplation can. And if God were to make himself visible to human eyes, as if he were a material object, then the journey of discovery, the hunger of the soul, and the very purpose of existence would collapse into nothingness. There would be no growth, no inner striving, no unfolding of conscience. Existence would become mechanical, devoid of wonder. The divine mystery is not a cruelty, it is a gift, for it keeps alive the quest that defines us. The world, however, presents us with contradictions. On one hand, there is beauty, justice, and harmony in the natural order. On the other, in human society, we see cruelty, deceit, and injustice tearing at the fabric of life. It is tempting to blame God for the oppression that unfolds before our eyes. We see the innocent suffering, the corrupt thriving, and we ask, where is God? Is he only the God of the powerful and not the God of the weak? Yet such questions often overlook the fact that moral choices lie in human hands. God has endowed us with freedom, and with that freedom comes responsibility. The corruption of societies, the injustices that echo across generations, are not imposed by God but birthed by human malice. What we call divine absence is, in truth, human betrayal of the freedom entrusted to us. Generations inherit not only the virtues, but also the consequences of those before them. Children often pay the price for the errors of their ancestors. Nations collapse under the weight of long-standing injustices, and yet in each age humanity is given the opportunity to correct its course. Blaming God for the cruelty of men is like blaming the sun for the darkness of night. God remains constant, the source of light, but the turning of the earth creates shadows. The question is whether we choose to live in the shadow or step toward the light. Thus, when Carl Sagan or any thinker raises questions about God's existence, they are engaging in a noble act, for questions are the foundation of knowledge. But when those questions cross into demands that the infinite prove itself by finite standards, then they lose their wisdom. For the measure of truth cannot always be the eye or the hand. It must sometimes be the heart. Those who insist that only empirical evidence counts may find themselves prisoners of their own logic, unable to see beyond the walls they have built. And those who worship Sagan's skepticism without reflection should not be celebrated as enlightened. They should be pitied, for they confuse doubt with depth. The cosmos is indeed a wonder, but not a wonder that explains itself. It is a book written in a language that hints at an author. Its order is a sign, not a coincidence. And to recognize this is not to abandon science, but to place science in its rightful place, as a tool for exploring the how, but not the why. The why belongs to a realm higher than formulas. To deny that is to reduce the universe to a machine, when in truth it is a symphony. Ultimately, God is neither the God of the oppressor nor the God of the oppressed alone. He is God of all. Human freedom determines which side we stand on. To mistake the corruption of man for the absence of God is to fall into despair. The divine presence is not absent. It is woven into the very fabric of existence, waiting for those who seek with sincerity rather than arrogance. The quest for God is not a journey of the eye, but of the soul. And though the road may seem endless, it is in that endless striving that humanity finds its nobility. So let us ask questions, as Sagan taught us to. Let us search for answers with science, with philosophy, with reflection. But let us also know the boundary of our tools. To demand that God become an object of our laboratories is to misunderstand the essence of divinity. To recognize his presence through the perfection of creation is to step into wisdom. And those who dismiss this and continue to circle endlessly in skepticism may be applauded by some, but in truth, they walk away from light into their own shadows. The human journey is not one of mere survival, nor of gathering facts alone, but of meaning. Facts tell us what things are, but they do not tell us why they matter. A stone and a star can both be described by equations of mass and gravity, but only human reflection gives them significance. One as a fragment of Earth, the other as a beacon in the sky. Carl Sagan, in his poetic style, often reminded humanity that we are made of star stuff, that our atoms were born in the hearts of dying stars. This truth is awe-inspiring, but it is incomplete without asking, why should matter evolve into beings capable of wonder? Why should lifeless atoms learn to question their own origins? Why does the universe produce not only energy and matter, but also minds capable of reflection, conscience, and morality? These are not questions that physics can resolve. They belong to a deeper plane. The skeptic might argue that consciousness is just an accident, a byproduct of chemistry. But the very ability to call it an accident implies awareness, and awareness is not a trivial accident. A stone cannot call itself meaningless, nor can water debate its origin. Only the human mind can. To dismiss consciousness as mere accident is to close one's eyes to the greatest wonder of all, the self that asks the question. Science can measure the activity of neurons, but it cannot explain why subjective experience exists. Why should there be an inner light at all? Why should there be a self that knows it exists? The mystery of consciousness is a door that, if opened with humility, leads directly to the realization that our existence points beyond matter. In the modern age, many celebrate skepticism as if it were the highest wisdom. To doubt is considered noble, to question, heroic. But doubt without direction is only paralysis. It is like a sailor who tears down every map, dismisses every compass, and then boasts of his courage while drifting endlessly at sea. True courage is not endless doubt. It is the willingness to take the risk of belief, to step into meaning rather than circling endlessly around it. Sagan's insistence on evidence is a valuable lesson, but evidence does not always appear in the form of laboratory results. Sometimes evidence is written in the language of order, beauty, and moral intuition. The question is not whether evidence exists, but whether one has the eyes to recognize it. If the skeptic demands that God should be visible, let him consider, visibility is not proof of reality. Love is not visible, yet it transforms lives. Justice is not visible, yet nations rise and fall by it. Hope cannot be measured in a test tube, yet it sustains the weary soul. If invisible realities shape human destiny, why should we dismiss the possibility of an invisible creator? To insist that only the visible is real is to shrink the vastness of existence into a cage too small for truth. Moreover, if the universe were truly indifferent and blind, then morality would be nothing more than illusion. Right and wrong would be fictions, mere tools invented for survival. Yet within every human being lies a conscience that rebels against this reduction. When we see injustice, we do not merely say, "This is inconvenient to survival." We say, "This is wrong." When we comfort a child, we do not simply act on instinct. We act on compassion. Conscience speaks with a voice that transcends biology. Where does this voice come from? Is it not another sign of something beyond matter, something divine woven into the fabric of human nature? To be fair, Carl Sagan's vision of the cosmos was one of wonder, and wonder is the beginning of wisdom. But wonder without direction is like a flame that dazzles without giving warmth. True wonder must lead somewhere. It must open into reverence. When we look at the vast galaxies, when we consider the delicate balance of physical constants, when we realize that a slight change in the laws of physics would make life impossible, the honest heart cannot call it all an accident. It is as if the universe were finely tuned for life, as if written by a hand that knows us. Skeptics may say this is coincidence, but coincidence on such a scale becomes indistinguishable from intention. And yet, even with such signs, doubt persists. Why? Because doubt is not always born of reason. It is often born of will. Many do not reject God because of lack of evidence, but because of reluctance to surrender. To admit a creator is to admit accountability. If the universe is not blind chance but design, then our lives are not accidents but responsibilities. The human heart resists this weight, preferring freedom without responsibility. Thus, skepticism becomes a shield, not against ignorance, but against conscience. But there is another path. To question sincerely is to be led slowly toward light. The one who begins in doubt but remains humble, who admits the limits of reason, will find that faith does not oppose knowledge, it completes it. Faith is not the enemy of science, but its horizon. Science can reveal how stars burn, how planets orbit, how cells divide. Faith reveals why it matters that there are stars, planets, and cells at all. Together, they form not a contradiction but a harmony, two instruments in the same cosmic symphony. The tragedy of modern thought is that it often divides these instruments, forcing a false choice between faith and reason, between science and God. But the greatest minds of history did not see this conflict. They saw science as the study of God's creation, faith as the recognition of God's presence. When divided, both become weak. Science without meaning becomes cold, faith without reason becomes blind. But when united, they elevate humanity to its true potential, to see the universe not only with the eye of calculation, but with the eye of reverence. Thus, the true flaw in Sagan's vision is not that he asked questions, but that he limited the scope of his answers. He looked at the universe and saw beauty, but he stopped short of worship. He saw order, but he hesitated to call it design. He saw mystery, but he refused to accept meaning. His legacy is one of awakening curiosity, and for that he must be honored. But to stop where he stopped is to remain halfway up the mountain, refusing to climb higher to where the horizon opens fully. In the end, the human soul cannot live on skepticism alone. Doubt may be a spark, but it cannot be the fire that sustains life. Sooner or later, The heart hungers for certainty, for a ground on which to stand. The one who endlessly questions without ever stepping into faith is like a wanderer who circles a well but never drinks. He may describe the well's shape, its depth, its structure, but he will die of thirst while praising his curiosity. The wise one is not the one who knows every measurement of the well, but the one who drinks and lives. And so the invitation remains before every human being, to look at the universe not merely as an object of study, but as a sign of something greater. To see in its perfection a whisper of the divine. To accept that science and faith are not enemies, but companions. And to realize that while skepticism may seem like light, unchecked, it leads only into shadows. Shadows of meaninglessness, despair, and emptiness. True light lies beyond those shadows, in the recognition that the author of the cosmos is not absent but closer to us than we are to ourselves.